Welcome back to another Share Your Light episode. This is where we highlight members of our listening community who are doing spectacular things or stepping into their power or have something to offer that maybe you'll listen to and you'll say, wow, that really resonates with me, or that's something that I want to explore a little bit more in my own life. Now, today's person is very familiar. It's Jenn from thankgoddess.org. She's been on the show several times to discuss astrology with us, to kind of light our way with what's coming up astrologically. But we were having a conversation a while back and realized that so much of astrology is completely overwhelming for so many people. So we thought we would do this bonus episode to just really simplify some of the basic concepts of astrology, but also help you find some of the markers in your own chart so that you can start to explore this a little bit and become more empowered to be able to find those patterns. And when someone mentions, oh, this is in the fourth house, you'll be able to go to your own chart and say, oh, that's what that means for me. So welcome back, Jenn. I'm not going to do the traditional bio because our folks know you, but it is our wonderful dear friend, Jenn Edwards from thankgoddess.org.
Hi, Denise. I'm so happy to
Hi.
be here.
Yes, we've talked about this as well. I understand astrology, but I don't retain it. So a lot of times you'll explain things to me over and over. You're very patient, which I love about you. But what would be some really basic things that someone might need to know if they just open up their chart, they have it in front of them? What would be some of the things to look for that would help them begin to understand how to read their own chart for themselves?
Well, the very basic framework is the big three. That's what I like to call the big three. So whenever I start a reading on anyone, I look at their sun sign, which is the day that you're born, your moon sign, and then your rising sign, also known as the ascendant. And that's why time is super important when you are creating a birth chart. And I always say in astrology, 5 minutes doesn't matter until it does. Mm-hmm. And if you are one of those people who do not have an exact birth time, it wasn't recorded when you were born or you were adopted, a good astrologer can actually rectify that for you. If you don't have access to your time and you want to look at your own things, you can focus on the sign of your sun and the sign of your moon, because chances are very good that it's not going to move very much. It'll be in the same sign on that day. So the sun is your self, it's your being in the world, it's part of your ego, it's your higher self, and it's your purpose. And, with all of us, depending on what age we are, going all the way back, we are always looking for our sun sign, right? Or do we identify with our sun sign? And the moon sign is our emotional body. It's how we react, our internal emotions, and also it's who we actually are. And the sun is who we're striving to be in our higher purpose self. So we can learn a lot just from the sign of our sun in combination of the sign of our moon and how we express ourselves, our basic vibration, which is very cool. So like if you were to take, I'll use myself as an example. I'm a Sagittarius. And my sun, my sun is in Sagittarius. My moon is in Scorpio. So this means that, I am a scorpionic being looking to be that carefree Sagittarius in this lifetime. It also shows the way that I feel, the level of expression of emotions, and how I express my emotions, which I think is, one of the key things when we learn about ourselves. There's some validation when we learn about that, but also when we learn about the people around us in our family, we understand how they communicate on an emotional level, which is very valuable.
Well, see, that's wonderful. And one of the things you had mentioned is that there are certain psychic traits that may show up in people's charts, or certain like little markers that if it shows up in a certain place, it might mean that you're more drawn to being psychic or drawn to spirituality. Or could you chat about that for a minute?
Let me just say that everyone has the ability to deeply connect in all ways. And sometimes people have a supersonic highway, and sometimes people have, valleys and hurdles in order to deeply connect. And as for psychic markers in the chart, we want to look at your luminaries. Your luminaries are your sun and your moon. And we want to see if they are located in the fourth house of the astrological chart. There are 12 houses in the astrological chart. The psychic houses are the fourth house, the eighth house, and the 12th house. So if we have the sun or the moon in any of those houses, we have a predisposition to pick up on undercurrents of energy at a basic level. On top of that, if the luminaries, the sun or the moon, are making any contacts with Uranus or Neptune, those are source connectors. Neptune is our connection to source. So we look at like angels, spirit guides, higher self, higher love. Neptune's the higher vibration of Venus. Uranus, I love me some Uranus, but Uranus is the higher vibration of Mercury. So if Mercury is our planet of communication, me talking to you, how I talk to you, that's my Mercury. Uranus is a higher vibration of that. So it's the tapping into universal consciousness and knowledge. So what this does is it brings flashes of brilliance when it touches your moon or your sun. There are also many other factors, but indefinitely, this is something that is, whenever I look at a chart and I see this, I know for a fact that either the person I'm dealing with doesn't realize this is happening. Usually with Uranus, it shows up as anxiety first because we don't know how to channel that energy. But then once they realize what's going on, they sort of start to open up and embrace it and make space for it rather than try to push it out because it's uncomfortable.
I love that you started with everyone has the capacity to make that connection to spirit and divine. So you may look at your chart, you may be off the chain, intuitive and connected and psychic, and you're not seeing these in your chart. It doesn't mean you're any less of those things. It just means that you have found another pathway to make that connection. So I think sometimes people will, I had years ago, someone, different type of reading, and they looked at, I don't remember what, it was just a different type of reading. It wasn't astrology. And they had said, well, you might be a little intuitive and able to connect if you really work at it. And I thought, okay, thank you. And in my head, I was thinking, you're full of shit, aren't you? And I discounted that whole field because it didn't resonate with what I felt for myself to be. And I think with the astrology stuff, so many people have grown up with just that very limited little part of, you look up your sun sign in the newspaper, not the newspaper anymore, online, and you read this little generic blurb that doesn't really encompass you as an individual or really the collective of, so say if you read Sagittarius, you and I are both Sagittarius, we might perceive that differently based on other aspects of our chart, but it's just too generic. It doesn't, but it's fun to read.
Yes. And also what's good to know, and actually a lot of people don't realize, is that horoscopes forecasting is written as if your rising sign is the same as your sun sign. And that actually is not, that's probably correct about 25% of the time. So I'm a Sagittarius. I have a Cancer rising. And so I read Cancer because, without getting too in depth, that will tell me what's happening in my life because the houses are lining up that way. So basically, your horoscope is based off of what your rising sign is, whether or not your sun sign is the same. So if I were to read Sagittarius, that would only be accurate if I also had a Sagittarius rising.
So should you read both?
I read both. I
Okay.
actually read because I just am a glutton for for horoscopes. Horoscopes are like the soap operas of like the
They're
1980s,
fun, yeah.
as the world turns, what does this magazine have to say about what they think is I just love it. It's a guilty pleasure. So I will read Cancer first. I will read Sagittarius second, and then I will read for my moon sign, which is Scorpio. I will read for all of them just because if there is a major happening in Sagittarius, it will affect my sun sign. So that inevitably that will show up.
Okay. So do you filter when you're reading Sag, then you're reading Scorpio, you're reading Cancer, you're reading all of these things. Do you think about them differently when you're reading them? Like, oh, my sun sign, so this is this aspect of my life. Or do you just keep it as more of a generalized thing?
So when I read for my rising sign, that tells me what area of my life is impacted in the
Okay.
horoscope. Where can I expect the energy to happen in my life? So the rising sign will tell me that. When I read for my sun sign, this will show me how I will endure the process, how I am affected as an individual in this process. And then my moon sign will show me my feelings around this process.
See, I think it's important that so many people think the only purpose of astrology is for prediction, for forecast, for to find your horoscope, when that's just one little tiny piece of the pie. From what I've experienced when you've done readings for me, when we've talked about this, is more about helping you connect more with your own inner knowing so that you can make choices based on where am I going? Is this the highest and best? Does this align with my blueprint?
Absolutely. When I open up a session and I'm looking at someone's chart, the first thing that I look at is, their IC, which is their Imam Coli. I look at the psychic houses and I look at their Chiron. The reason why I do that is it shows me how they are running at a subconscious level and how they are bringing it to conscious state without even realizing it.
Mhm.
And often I will have people showing up because they are having a hard time accessing themselves. And this blueprint that's in front of us shows us how, on a basic level, we communicate and how we get in our own way in connection of source in that way. So there's many layers to this. The fun part is, like when I first started with astrology around the age of 13, I wanted to figure out other people because my wounding is around other people. I'm the black sheep, that's just how
Right.
I've always been. So I started off with astrology in a very psychological way. How I communicate, why I communicate the way that I do, how does that present itself in the world, and then it moved into how am I blocking myself from my purpose? And when I talk about purpose, you're in purpose when you're in peace, and it's always evolving. So when we have this one set goal in our mind, we're always ever evolving. So it doesn't end at that doorway. There's more that
Right.
continues. So the idea is to try to find peace and allow yourself to be receptive. There's two very different energies. There's the charging, controlling, dominating, right? And then there's the actual reception of option. So depending on where you are, the chart shows all.
But it is a tool. It's a tool to use. It's not, I've talked with a lot of people over the years that go at it with such rigidity. I think that it can become as with any form of something that's going to give you more insight about yourself, or a tool of divination, or a tool that is, to grow and expand your consciousness. That's what it is. It's a tool and a way to access. But when you allow it to become so much more, I feel like it kind of takes away from, like it becomes, one of the big things with when you learn a mediumship, you want to be in control of it, not have it be in control of you. And I feel the same way about a chart, about really knowing your chart.
Yeah, a good way to look at a chart. First of all, I love how when you open up your readings, it's free will is very much a part of this process. If you were to look at the thought process that we all come from source, that's the base, right? And then, how you arrive at your opening of consciousness to that place of inception is removing the filters to get back there. And so all it is really removing filters to get back to the white sheet of paper where creation began.
Okay, I have to interject. Did I ever tell you the story of my twin brother from another mother?
No.
Okay, so I worked next door to this woman at one of the schools I was in. We worked right next door. We visited, we knew each other. And she was really into astrology and all this stuff. And I told her when my birthday was, and she said, no way. that was a dear friend of mine's birthday, same exact day, we're the same age, same thing. This person was male, I was, brought up female. And then she said, well, I said, well, what time? And I told her the time I was born. And she said, well, I'm going to get in touch with him and see if he has the same. And we were born like at the same, we came onto this planet at the exact same time. So I met this man in person. I had helped this friend move, and she said, oh, I want you to meet, fill in the blank, the person's name. It was like talking to myself, because all of my idiosyncrasies of, you know better than most how private I am and how reclusive and all those things. And said, well, you could come by, but why don't we meet somewhere? And she says, no, we're on our way over. And I said, don't do that to him. He's not being mean. It's not that he doesn't want to see you. You have to honor those boundaries. But there were certain things that just were so normal, like my normal, that a lot of people don't understand. So that has always given me a different perspective of charts, because I also think it's cool as hell that this person ended up in both of our lives. What are the chances? And she has the same birthday as my sister. So don't you find that sometimes they'll show up with little markers of, that's what I'd love to ask you. If you have someone in your life who you have difficulty with, or you have unresolved issues, and their chart, their birthday, all that stuff, but you can't quite make it. Is it normal for spirit to bring someone else in with those same, so that you get to work on it on the side? So hopefully that's circumventing having to come back and do it again with that person in entirety. That's my plan anyway.
It's like a third party interpreter.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a third party interpreter of energy. It's almost as if, of course, every interaction is fated, right? Mm-hmm. So it changes our comprehension of consciousness. But, when you are unable to make a point, land the plane, you have to look at the energy at which your intention is coming from. And also how the reception is open to hearing that. And so sometimes when we do have the intervention, the divine intervention of a third party, you kind of can hone your skills on communication. Because a lot of times you'll find where there is, and I have actually learned this through a close friendship that I've had over the last 20 years, the way that I communicate is much different than the way my friend communicates. And so I hold a lot of space to let them, they have an air Mercury, which means that there's a lot of prattle before we get to the point. And I have, the brilliant minds are Mercury air Mercuries. So, there's no shame in that game, but I have a Capricorn Mercury. It's an Earth Mercury. It's very results orientated. So let's get to the point is what usually happens here. And so once I realized that our communication is completely different, because I help him land the plane. And then I give some sense, or I open the space for nonsense to release my rigidity, because I have rigidity around that. And I see that once you're able to self-actualize and take accountability for your energy in the interaction, you learn so much more about yourself.
When you had mentioned earlier about you went into this to learn more about other people, to really use that as a tool, using it with family members, because I've always been very respectful of not peeking in someone's psychic closet. And a lot of times when someone is so close to you, you can't anyway. So if your partner, your siblings, your parents, your guardians, whoever, or your children. But I think could be a really useful tool is to know where your children's charts are and how would you look at the child's chart in tandem with your own, or just the child's chart to understand how to support them more on their own journey?
One of my favorite things to do is read for children and to read for parents and stewards of children, because if that philosophy were available to my parents, how different would my life be now? There's a lot of divine intervention and meaning behind that. But with that being said, when we look at a child's chart, we can see how they communicate and how they learn, how they feel, how they express emotions. And first, we would look at the child's chart to see how they are as an individual, a developing individual. And then we look at comparing the parents and how they're communicating. One of my favorite things is to take two siblings and put their charts together and then create the bridge through the parents' intervention. Because a lot of times when there's conflict between, siblings, it's because they're not connecting and there needs to be a bridge to that gap. And that's often what the parents are. But I think it's probably like 2 months ago, I had this really deep reading with a mom and we had two daughters, so much alike, so different, all at the same time. And we were able to create this awareness for the parents on how to open them up to their gifts, but also be able to live in peace. And not in competition. And that's really what it is. It's usually competition over affection or validation, or that's just sibling rivalry for you. But there's a reason for that. And so anyhow, looking at family charts is amazing because it, instead of having the resistance of because I said so,
right.
This is why you do it because I said so. The parents can understand, oh, so Jimmy learns by experience first and then comprehends the information. So if they can't understand something about biology, take them to the field and show them, and then come home and work on the written assignment. It's the way that we think. And once we open that up for children, then all of a sudden they have no resistance around learning. We understand them.
That was a huge thing. I hope it still is, but in the educational system, and I know we have a lot of teachers that listen, whether traditional or not, that teaching to multiple intelligences, and a lot of districts, a lot of states really pushed find the modality that works best for the individual child. So it was basically taking the special ed model and applying it to generalized education. But people went through the workshops, but then they didn't differentiate. They didn't change the curriculum. It was out of the adult or the teacher's comfort zone to offer those different options. I'm not saying every, but it was never applied. So what you're saying is you could use that as a tool to support. So you may have a child struggling in school or in a social setting or in anything at all. And you could find little things in their chart that you could say, if we help bolster this, if we encourage this, it may give them the skill set, or it might. One of the signs I get a lot in readings is spirit will show me turning a chessboard. And when I see that in my mind's eye, it means look at it from a different strategy. And I feel like you're saying the same thing of offering people a tool for their children or for themselves. You know this because you know my situation, but I'm a Sag with a Leo moon. My son is a Leo with a Sag moon. We have different rising. But when he was younger, we would flare hot and fast, but then it was just done. And there was no grudge. It's like, you done? Yeah, I'm done. But we were so much alike in our temperaments that it caused that mushroom cloud. So I think if I had looked at that back then, because I didn't find this out till years later, it really would have changed my perspective of how we interacted. So do you see that as, well, I don't want to say an invasion of privacy, but with looking into a child's chart, I guess it would be the same as making sure that they were taken care of medically or physically or emotionally. You're just using it as another way to give them what they really need.
I kind of look at it as the key to their love language, their key to their understanding language. And, to put it in perspective, when I'm doing readings with people, I look, before I even begin the session, I look at their Mercury sign to figure out how to deliver the information that I need to deliver. Because much like a child, everybody's chart and their level of comprehension, not in brilliance, it's not what I mean. It's just how they comprehend information or how they will more easily accept information. Has to be done in nuances. So, for someone who has an air Mercury, it's going to look a lot different than someone who has a water Mercury, or someone who, and I know that sounds strange, but try it sometime. Look up your child's Mercury sign, right? And learn about that sign and start communicating with them in that way and watch the difference it makes in the way that you connect with your children verbally.
I love that. I absolutely love that because that's useful. especially if you have a sign that is maybe the complete polar opposite of what your child's is. So you really have no idea. So if you have, in love language, using that as an example is wonderful. And how different is that than if you're clairvoyant, clairaudient, clairsentient, claircognizant? None of them are better than the other. They're just different. But if you know someone else is going to experience or perceive something in a certain way, it allows you to meet them halfway or help them build the skills they need to process information from that perspective.
Absolutely. I know that if my parents had gotten a hold of my birth chart when I was younger, I probably wouldn't have gotten grounded as many times as I did. I'm lying. I probably would have. I was a fun kid.
Yeah. Well, you're a fun human. Well,
Yes.
and I'm going to throw you under the bus with this one a little bit. You shared something earlier about your chart being very similar to another astrologer. Are you comfortable with me sharing that?
Sure.
Or not really? Okay.
Sure. Yeah.
Well, I'm sure that anyone who has followed astrology is aware of Robert Hand. Could you tell us a little bit about him, please?
Robert Hand. So Robert Hand he is an amazing astrologer. I would actually coin him as one of the fathers of predictive astrology, to be quite honest with you. He has written so many books in the late 60s, early 70s, defining transits and comprehension of transits, and also the comprehension of synastry placements, composite placements, and how they interact with each other. So his psychological profile and spiritual profile in as being a benchmark for all of astrologers today is enormous. If you talk to any astrologer, they have at least 3 Robert Hand books in their possession because he wrote it down.
Right. Everything you just said, we just jumped away from the big 3 into how far this can actually go. There's no bottom to this. You can never be the expert. You can never know all of things, which I think applies to pretty much all the juju or all of these type of modalities. I'll say it because I know Jenn won't say it because she's humble, but Jenn was blessed to have a reading with Robert Hand, and he was amazed because they have the same placements in their chart, correct?
Yeah.
Like as far as the love and that connection with astrology, that it was. So that's what you're talking about, is there is going to be something in your chart that you can look at, especially if people are so confused right now with, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. Where do I go from here? I think I want to do this. You might be able to find it in there once you know where to look.
This is true. When we're looking at our chart, we're kind of looking at how we can find, this is where the woo comes in a little bit, but it's how can we find peace, and then rather than being the explorer, being open to opportunity. So if you want to look at the energy around your purpose in this lifetime, that's the North Node. The North Node is indicative of where the eclipses were when you were born. For someone born in 1976, your North Node is going to be in Scorpio. For someone who is born in 1977, your North Node is going to be in Libra.
Mm-hmm.
And so on and so forth. So your North Node, the sign placement, but more importantly, the house placement will tell you what you're here to do. And what I love about the North Node energy, just to note, is that we're scared. Can I swear on this?
Oh, yes, you can swear.
We are scared shitless of our North Node because our North Node is what we're supposed to be doing. And the North Node is the suggestion of this lifetime. Mm-hmm. And the South Node is the gifts that we bring with us. So we're so familiar with South Node energy, we revert there, but we become stagnant. And so we get propelled into North Node anxiety. So that's why I always say to people, if you feel fearful, run towards it, because often our fears of the unknown result of moving forward are what keep us from moving into our purpose.
Exactly. See, I love that because it's useful. It's really useful. And I used to go years ago I still go there from time to time, astro.com, and print out a chart and look at the different stuff. And there's different things you can play around with on that. You can start exploring this a little bit on your own. And just with the things that Jenn has shared with us today, and I know, shameless plug, you also have an on-demand basic astrology class on your website that would help kind of walk people through. Is there another way people can access their chart if they're not sure where to go or how to find it?
Absolutely. So I have been using it, and this is not a plug. I'm not paid by anyone. This is what I use in my day-to-day astrology and have used for the last 25, 30 years. Astro.com. Robert Hand's actually very much a part of that. And it will generate free reports where you can kind of get a psychic window peeking in. He's written most of them, which is pretty interesting. But on a side note, Astro.com, the reason why I recommend this is because it gives a beginner everything that you need. Nothing is missing. There's nothing worse than someone trying to figure out what their birth chart means, and there's lines missing. There's houses missing or house definition missing. Because, even though different websites are being presumptuous that you already know what you're looking at, you don't.
Right.
And that's why astro.com is so great. It has all the planets, it has all the houses, it has all the little degrees. You can save 100 charts for free. Up to 100 charts. You don't have to pay for anything. I have used it for so long that I have actually put a lot of Maine's coordinates in there back in the late 90s when it was sort of whatever you want to call it, a community project that's has now become a benchmark of learning. So you can also, what I love about this is as you get more advanced, if you want to, you can play around and you can add transits from the past or the future. So if I'm looking at cycles and patterns in my life, which I often do, that's what I do, I could go back 19 years ago and see where the planets were. Oh, okay, this makes sense. Or if there's a major event, I can go back and see what was going astrologically. This is what I do for fun. I understand that this isn't what a lot of people do for fun, but anyhow, to answer your original question, astro.com for me is the whole box set of what you need, starter kit for understanding astrology.
I had a lot of fun on there recently. Is they have one of the free reports that they offer is travel, but you can use it like astrocartography to where you belong, and it shows all the lines. And because I've lived so many different places, I would click on the line and where I was close to it, and it would say this, and this. So many of them lined up with what I was experiencing when I lived in that part of the country or in that different region of the country. So I think that that's really interesting. Could it be keeping it too narrow a parameter? I think that's with anything. Getting your chart, click and say, oh, this is what my Venus means. And then take that and apply it to a course or further study so that you can start using it as a tool for self-development.
Yeah, absolutely. Each planet has a basic vibration, which is the sign. And then once that's discovered, look up the house that the planet is in. And you just in that one action of, like, say, if your Mercury's in Capricorn, you look that up. And then your Mercury is also in your 7th house. You look up Mercury in 7th house. You have just learned more about yourself than you have probably realized up in this moment in your life. You would be surprised. Your Venus sign and your Venus house are the ways in which you value what you're attracted to and what your love language is. Your Mercury is your communication, how you communicate, and who you like to communicate with, whether it's insular or whether it's in the exterior, other people. Your moon sign is how you easily or not as easily express your emotion. So once you understand all that stuff, all of a sudden it's like a complete, total change of awareness of yourself.
So you had mentioned earlier that if you don't know your birth time, you know your day, you know where you were located when you were born, but you don't know what time. I had heard years ago, one person said use 6 o'clock in the morning. Someone else had said use 12, like 12 a.m. Is there a generic time that will at least give someone a benchmark to be able to get this basic information? Yeah,
if you don't know your birth time, pay attention to the signs that the planets are in.
Okay.
Because if you add a birth time to charting, it's going to put these planets in a house, and that's going to change the vibration of the planets. That's why the time is sort of important. If you don't know your time, just learning about the sign of your Mercury, the sign of your Venus, the sign of your moon is going to give you a wealth of information, that enough wealth of information of self-development, that if you want assistance on rectifying your time of birth, that might be something that interests you in the future. Because the sign placement has so much knowledge and illumination in it. And then when you add it to the house placement of the planet, which has to do with the time, it refines it down even more to something more specific.
Okay. That's really helpful.
And the way that I and most astrologers will rectify a time is just spending time with someone, because your first house, which is your ascendant, which is based on the time you're born, is how you express yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So just by having a conversation with someone, I can figure, I mean, I'm not, it takes me a little while, but I can refine it down to what I think. And usually I haven't had a strikeout, but knock on wood. Knock on wood.
See that you just brought all of that information, because even when we've, you listen to, oh, this is coming and this is happening. People need a base of knowledge so that they have a foundation of understanding, or it does start to sound like too much. It gets overwhelming. It Charlie Brown's teacher, that repetitive sound. And I think you're giving people, you just gave everybody this little snapshot. Is there anything else that you go on Astro, you pull up your chart, you're close to your birth time, you think this is it, you've learned about, oh, my Venus is this is my love language, this is how I communicate because of my Mercury. Are there any other aspects of that really basic level that would help people that are, because I know we have a lot of people that are they love their chart, they understand it, they know their ascendants, but this seems like it could become very addictive.
So you remember Daryl Martini?
Yes, of course
Yes.
I do. The Cosmic Muffin.
That's right. What did he used to say? It's a wise person who rules the stars, and a fool who's ruled by them.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, I used to love when I'd hear that.
Yeah, and so he was actually the reason why I first started getting into astrology. I'd listened to him on BLM, and and the reason why I bring him up is because astrology is energy.
Oh, I have to interject.
Yeah.
BLM is a radio station in the state of Maine. It wasn't an acronym.
Yes. Oh, that's right. I forget.
Yeah.
So astrology is energy. Okay. And energy is presented at all times. How we're able to comprehend that energy and use that energy and evolve in that energy is very much in part of our ability to hold space for that. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that whenever you hear predictive astrology, or when I come on and I talk about the transits, you have the ability to use that energy to grow, evolve, and learn, or to allow things to happen to you, right? Which that never happens. Does that make sense? Am I making sense?
Mm-hmm. Yes, that does make sense.
So, whenever we talk about eclipse season and we talk about what that means, how that appears in your chart is defined by the energy that you will receive. What you use with it is your own free will. So when someone gets too heady in their chart, it gets too rigid, that means that their ego's too involved, like they're identifying too much to move forward. There's rigidity. There's no room for movement. We always want to be in room for movement and reception.
Right. Because even though that is a snapshot, and I'm going to go back to, twin brother from another mother, we still had different life experiences. We had different cultural experiences. We had different locations. There were so many other variables that impacted who we became as people, even though there were creepy amount of similarities, but still the free will aspect, but also we chose other things besides just our chart. Do I think we that's on our checklist when we're incarnating? Okay, this is my chart. This fits with everything, but we also have other aspects that we have to work into that mix. And I think that's fascinating, because the more you can learn about yourself and how you interact with people, how you interact with yourself, what feels right and true for you that may not feel right and true for someone else, it allows you to have more empathy and compassion for other people and the way that they're navigating being here.
Absolutely. And, to give you a really good example of free will within a birth chart, I'm a part of many different groups on Facebook that have to do with astrology because I enjoy to see where people are coming from or what they're asking or what the collective needs in this moment. It's kind of easy to gauge that by what people are trying to figure out in their own chart. One of the ones that I really enjoy seeing is, who are the naysayers of astrology? What are the signs that don't believe in astrology? And one of the ones I see a lot is Mercury and Capricorn. And I laugh because Mercury and Capricorn is very results orientated, very grounded, not into the woo. And you're talking to an astrologer who has Mercury and Capricorn. But the cool part is that if I haven't worked with it for as long as I have and haven't had the results around it that I have had through trial and error, I wouldn't be doing this. I have seen tangible results in my own life, in my own expansion and helping other people with that Mercury and Capricorn. I'm not going to share that unless it's results orientated. And so it's really interesting, what people think of the stereotypes of the signs and what actually translates through the chart.
So you've had a lot of different experiences, jobs, different profession than astrology that you've had. Does the astrology, when Robert Hand said you have the same chart that you're meant to do this work, I can't imagine you not having astrology be part of your life. It's just such an integral part of the way that you view things and that you love it so much. I mean, that's the thing. You just love this topic. You love everything about it. Have you ever felt that same connection to other things that you've done?
Yes. So if you were to look at without getting heady with my chart, I have a stellium in Sagittarius. And for those of you who understand astrology, I have a stellium in Sagittarius, Sun, Moon, and Neptune. And Sagittarius is in my 6th house of service to others. So this means that, I'm very passionate about helping other people. I'm very passionate about showing other people love, support, and seeing them. With astrology, that has helped me do that. However, and this will probably resonate with a lot of people that are listening, it's funny through our own upbringing what is considered of value and what is not considered of value. So when I reached a certain age, the things that I loved and considered of value were deemed hobbies, and I needed to get a professional job that had tangible reality constructs in it and blah, blah, blah. Right. So astrology became the hobby. And now I realize that, and when I work with people, I often say, if you couldn't fail, what would you do? Or if money didn't exist, what would you do? Or the new one that I really like is, because people can relate to this, is that if no matter what you did, you all made the same amount of money, what would you do? Right? There was no status involved. Like, what would you do? So with astrology, it came full circle because I love this. And I used it in every part of everything that I ever threw myself in to navigate. And I, helped my friends, I helped my family. And then finally, I'm like, this is my love language. And if anything didn't exist, if I had to stand in love, what would it be? And it would be this. It would be the exploration of the cosmos with Carl Sagan behind me.
Oh,
I love him.
I'm a big fan of Carl.
I am too.
Like Carl. Yes.
What a philosopher, that guy.
Again, made it accessible to common people. Really opened the door. But I agree, you've used it your whole life. And so many people who may be in a professional job and they love some aspect of woo or spirituality or divination or connecting with spirit, I still think you're using it all the time. And it doesn't mean, quit your day job and go do something else. It just might mean that you're utilizing that in your everyday life, but you could also explore it more if that's something you consider that you'd like to have be your primary passion or view or outlook.
Well, and with all that Capricorn energy in my chart, right? 1 foot in, 1 foot out is how I walk. As you know, being my friend for so many
Yeah,
years, 1 foot in, 1 foot out. I walked for a very long time because there's a very practical part of me. But I do realize too, my intention is to help people. So it's a
right.
completely different intention. I'm not putting up a sign that says Jenifer's House of Astrology, admit one. You know what I mean? Like it's like who
No,
who can I speak their language to and get them to open up to possibilities outside of what they're seeing now currently.
right. And it is very much service work, which we're finding, personally, I'm finding, and from a lot of folks I'm speaking with, that divide is getting a little bit jagged right now as far as people aligning with something that might be more self-serving than service of others or serving spirit or anyway, I don't need to go off on a rant on that. But I do think that as far as your true convictions to this work, it's very apparent. And if another shameless plug is your Moon Lodge is a good example of that. You over give, not overgive, what's the word I want? You give ample opportunities for people to explore so many variations of their connection with spirit. That was good, wasn't
I like that.
it?
I like that a lot.
So, so what can we, well, high five to spirit on that, because it wasn't me. How can people find you again, sweetie? Because what you're offering is you're getting ready to take things in a new direction. And I think part of that is wanting to empower people to be able to look at their own chart so that they can understand themselves more, but also grow, evolve, exactly what you just said a few minutes ago. So they know thankgoddess.org. You had mentioned something coming up with Moon Lodge for folks.
So with the Moon Lodge, I created Moon Lodge as a community so people can sort of have a safe space with no judgment, no competition, nothing, to really explore their gifts or their interests in their gifts and see where it goes. And also to understand how to work with energies. I write a daily energy report of a general idea of what is going to be presented to you during the day. And there are 3 tiers. If you just want the horoscopes, we got that's I named them after the phases of the moon. So we have the
Mhm.
maiden. The maiden
Yeah.
is just the written material from me. The mother is the written material from me and the videos after they are live. So you won't be able to, you'll get the recordings. And then the wise wild woman has access to our private Facebook community that has all the interaction, we have yoga by Michelle Moody. We have Mondays, our channeled messages and wisdom from Tina Moody, our friend Tina. We have Kundalini yoga from our friend Tessie. And we also have Susie Price, who comes on during the lunar happenings in our lodge to give some advice. So there's a big platform for people to just be able to, and they all started the same way with coming on and sharing, which is amazing.
Okay.
As a collective moving in November, I'm going to start teaching people in the group in the Wise Wild Woman tier how to read transits in the charts. So we'll start with the moon first because the moon is affecting us every single day. And so basically I'm going to teach people how to look at transits in their own charts. And this will be a 12-month series. Once a month, we'll meet and talk about a planet. And that way you can have a better comprehension, and that's a part of the membership. You'll have a better comprehension of what you're looking at. So you can kind of do like your own rabbit holing rather than, what I love to do is that I'll come up with theories and concepts and I'll write something and then I'll go read something from someone that I respect and admire, and it's parallel with them. And that's like a small victory. I'm like, yes. And that's how we judge our growth and how we understand stuff. So that's open for anyone who would like to be in the Wise Wild Woman tier. And like you said, I do have the beginner's astrology class, which is on instant download. So it's the audio as well as the handouts from my live class that I've done before in the past. That gives you enough knowledge to do some serious rabbit holing. You will know a lot about your chart. It's not too much information like a fire hose. And it gives you enough space to really pause and look at your own chart in comparison to what we're talking about. So it's not too heady. I think it's the perfect amount of conveyor food on comprehension with it. So I am happy with that.
The other part is this is incredibly generous on Jen's part because it's a highly, highly affordable community to be a part of. At the highest level, it's still a very minimal obligation financially for you on a monthly basis or an annual basis. And you also have someone that does crystal stuff
Yes.
as well.
Carrie
Yeah.
Bennett. She
Yeah.
does. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Carrie Bennett does our crystal wisdom, and she's been doing meditations, light meditation, light language meditation.
Yes. Yeah.
It's fascinating. I'm learning so many new things by people sharing their gifts that I didn't even realize existed, especially with Carrie.
Yes, which also goes back to, you may come to this with an interest in astrology, but then say, ooh, this really fascinates me, or I love her yoga style, or I love the tarot messages coming through from Susie. It's all very inclusive, or it may give you that motivation to say, I need to be a part of sharing what I have to offer with a community, whether it's Moon Lodge or another community, but just please at least check that out. I think you would be pleasantly surprised. It's a very inclusive, inviting community. I believe right now it's for women or people who identify as women, but
we do have some divine masculine energy in the group, which I truly enjoy because they do hold some space for us. But it's a safe space, and it's inclusive for anyone who wants to walk in their truth, be vulnerable, be who they are, and learn as much as they can without shame. You know, a lot of times people will keep what they're interested in on the down low. And this is a place where you can be a part of the down low.
Yes, you can be as out there as you want to be and be still held with love, respect, and compassion, which is another reason we just adore you, Jen, is that you hold space for people beautifully.
Oh, thank you, Denise. You do too.
You're welcome. Oh, it's that Sag thing, I think. Well, thank you all for listening. And again, you can find Jen at thankgoddess.org. Check out what she has to offer. Take care of yourselves. It's kind of rugged out there right now, but you know you came for something special, and you may have, who knows, you may find it right in that chart. Okay, take care.